Dustin Crum, seriously? Why? Why not? What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome to week 7 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL season. And 6 weeks of this, man. The league has never been more exciting, and it has never been more difficult for me to do this job. Wild comebacks continue, quarterback injuries unfortunately continue, and my weeks of 3 and 9 also continue. 1 and 3 across the board, 1 and 3 straight up, 1 and 3 against the spread, 1 and 3 over under. Awful. It has been an abjectly awful beginning to the season for me. The game has never been more exciting. It's never been less predictable, which is bad for somebody like me who's in the predictions business. So, yeah, my stuff looks terrible. It looks awful. And all we can do is continue doing the fundamental foundational work that I believe is correct and hope that we see the turnaround. And I still believe we'll see the turnaround. It's still early enough in the season that a turnaround is more than possible. Another thing we don't want to do too many more times is have an absolute dud in CFL fantasy, which is what I had back in week 6. I only brought in 53.3 fantasy points in week 6, which is, I think, easily my worst showing of the season to this point. It was outside of the top 10,000 across the CFL game last week, and number 771 in Derek Taylor's league, which only has, I think, 900 some entrants. So it was one of the worst weeks in that entire pool. What are you going to do? Sometimes it's going to happen. We don't have too many really, truly awful weeks in fantasy like we had last week. On the season, 557.3, just outside the top 1,200 overall, so I'm still in a spot that I'm comfortable with, and just outside the top 150 in Derek Taylor's league. My most outstanding player, if you want to call them that, from week 6 was Montreal wide receiver Austin Mack. 7 catches for 70 yards. He brought in 14 points, and he was my top performer. Last week doesn't matter. Last week doesn't matter nearly as much as this week. This week that is presented to us right now, the landscape is changing across the board. We're talking about quarterback injuries. We're talking about stud wide receivers returning to very good football teams, which we'll talk about. And all we can do is attack the week that's in front of us with the lines that are in front of us and the conditions that are in front of us. And that's what we're going to do this week. So come along with me. Our 4-game slate in week 7 sees the Edmonton Elks travel to Winnipeg to take on the Bombers. You got the Toronto Argos on the tail end of back-to-back road games in Hamilton to take on the Ticats, who've suddenly won back-to-back games. You got the Riders in BC to take on the Lions, who are coming off the bye. And the Ottawa REDBLACKS in Calgary taking on the Stamps. So obviously, like I said, complete lack of predictability league-wide, and that continued through last week. All the games last week went over after the previous 2 weeks where we were on an under run of 5-2. So just on a dime can just instantly turn around. And that's exactly what you saw. Basically 3 straight up upsets last week. I mean, Hamilton-Edmonton was a pick'em by the time the game kicked off. So you can count that if you want to. It's kind of 50-50. But for all intents and purposes, there were at least 2 solid upsets. In fact, the Toronto Argos were basically the only definitive favorite who actually won their game, definitive favorite in that game. And again, more quarterback uncertainties with the injury to Matt Schultz as well as the injury to Trevor Harris. It's fair to ask when we're going to see some stability, but I think that maybe that tide may be starting to turn a little bit. Let's see, and let's talk about these games. So we're going to start in Winnipeg, of course, with that Elks Bombers matchup in Winnipeg. And for Edmonton, look, it was only a 1-possession loss. That's a good thing for sure. But that was only after they forged a 13-point comeback in the fourth quarter and made another quarterback change. They went back to Jarrett Daig. And this is just what this is now. This is just what Chris Jones and the Elks are. It's and on a game-by-game basis, Who knows whether the starting quarterback will be the one that finishes the game or gets hooked. Like it happens. Like, good coaches have to know when to pivot, but then you have a coach like Chris Jones who over pivots and pivots every single game. So how is your still fairly young, still fairly developing quarterback supposed to... We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Chris Jones talked about it in a friggin' press conference, giving their quarterback the confidence that he needs. How is the constant and persistent fear of being hooked giving him the confidence that he needs? Of course, it doesn't help when the team around him takes 13 penalties for 179 yards. And again, it's so frustrating for the Elks because there are underlying numbers there that give them some reason for optimism. They ran the ball very well in that game last week against Hamilton. 19 carries for $137 and a rushing touchdown as a team. 27 first downs that generated a lot moving the ball. Only 2 sacks allowed on either of their quarterbacks in total. So they got good protection. There's underlying reasons to be optimistic. They also possessed the ball for over 32 minutes. But the underlying numbers are not good enough when your team is bad. So in terms of the quarterback fiasco that's going on here in Edmonton, was Jarrett Daig better than Taylor Cornelius was last week? Objectively, yes. He was. The numbers were better. He threw the ball better. He helped orchestrate that almost comeback, or at least that better, not even almost comeback, but at least the better final score than maybe the team deserved. So he was better. Is Jarrett Daig going to be better over the long term than Taylor Cornelius? I don't believe that's the case. And it looks like Cornelius is taking first team reps in practice. So it looks like he's going to be the starter yet again. Has Chris Jones completely botched his quarterback situation? Yes, absolutely he has. He has a starting quarterback, or a de facto starting quarterback, that can't be confident game in and game out that he's not going to get hooked. He goes to a secondary quarterback who has shown flashes. Trey Ford might as well be in the Federal Witness Protection Program at this point. And if I'm Taylor Cornelius, I look around the league and I see the quarterback injury situations. What's stopping me from walking into Chris Jones's office and demanding a trade? I'm not saying he's going to. I talked about this on Twitter. But what's stopping him at this point? On the Blue Bombers side of things last week, in no uncertain terms, the Bombers botched that game. They absolutely did. They allowed an unfathomable 25-3 run against them in the fourth quarter and overtime against a third-string quarterback. Although, really, we can't sit here and call Dustin Crum a third-string quarterback anymore after he went out and had the fourth quarter and overtime that he just had. But look, that never should have happened. Winnipeg never should have lost that game. Not against that competition. But they did. And also, despite leading that game 25-6, there was virtually no commitment to the run game. Now look, they found very little success. 26 rushing yards on 14 carries. The O-line didn't get the job done for them. Brady Oliveira didn't get the job done for them in the run game. So I get that. But 14 carries in a game that you were leading by that much means that you also weren't committed to the run game. What happens when you're not finding success with the run game, but you still have a big lead, is you pound the football. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell Mike O'Shea how to do his job, but I also kind of think they played scared because they weren't finding any success in the run game. And it's the first time that I can remember that this Bombers team potentially played scared given what their opponent was doing. The fact remains that whether they were playing scared or not, they were at a point that they were only playing the clock. They weren't playing the REDBLACKS anymore, not with that lead that late in the game. They weren't playing the REDBLACKS anymore, they were playing the clock. And they lost. Now look, obviously it wasn't just the stagnation in the run game that led to that. There was a pick six that Colaros threw. There was a bad fumble from Oliveira at kind of midfield that kind of flipped the field. Pretty porous run defense in that game, despite the fact that they generated 6 quarterback sacks against Dustin Crum. There are holes in this armor. There are things that the Blue Bombers need to clean up and need to do better. Luckily this week, they're playing the Edmonton Elks. Quite frankly, there is no better get-right spot in the CFL than a game against the Edmonton Elks, whether it's in Edmonton or in your home building. And look, I said when we were talking about the Dustin Crum game, this could get ugly, is what I thought. Because I really thought the Bombers were going to run it to them, and it looked like they were for 3 quarters. So if last week could get ugly, like this week is a bloodbath in the making. It really is. Oh, and by the way, Kenny Lawler's back, so good luck, Edmonton. So obviously we are quite heavily on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers around these parts this week, so let's go ahead and grab the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home to beat the Edmonton Elks. Now on the line, Winnipeg is laying an astronomical minus 14.5 at home in this game, and I think it's going to be a bloodbath. So I am going to hold my nose and lay those points. I hate laying this many points on anybody in any context, but I really feel that this is like a blowout. Like I really feel that this is 3 possessions at least. So 14.5 points, you might as well lay them. This is obviously a prime number for a teaser. If you want to do like, you know, a two pick, like 6-point teaser or whatever, if you're really into the betting side of things, this is a prime number because that 6 points drops it to 8.5. That feels really good. So that's really what real benefit of this number, but where we're just kind of picking the numbers as they exist, minus 14.5 on the Bombers. Total in the game set at 45.5 points. I'm feeling an over here. I think this game gets into at least the low 50s. So let's grab over 45.5 points in Edmonton, Winnipeg. Let's go Bombers 35, Elks 16. Let's go to Hamilton now, where the Argos are in town taking on the Ticats. Argos, like I mentioned, on the tail end of back-to-back road games, but enter this week as like I said, the only clear favorite from last week, who I think fully delivered. 28 second half points in a win at Montreal, but they took 15 penalties for 157 yards. So not all is bright and sunny. But it is kind of nice to see in an absolute sea of unrest at the quarterback position, whether that's through injuries, whether that's through inconsistent coaching, whether it's through inconsistent play, what have you. Chad Kelly delivers his best game as a passing quarterback in the CFL. In his CFL career, it's his best game. 84% on his completions, 351 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, but look, 3 touchdowns, we'll forgive that, and a rushing touchdown besides. So 4 total touchdowns for Chad Kelly in that game. He's got that dog in him. They talk about it. He's got that dog in him. Chad Kelly is that guy. He also hit 8 different receivers, 7 of which had at least 2 catches. So that is nigh on unstoppable. And it was, again, everybody 8 on the offensive side. Tavares Daniels, 3 catches for 91 yards. AJ Ouellette carried the ball 14 times for 95 yards. 2 touchdowns for David Ungerer, who is becoming a low-key red zone target for Chad Kelly and this Argos offense. Everybody 8 on the offensive side. And when you look at the defense, they held the Alouettes to under 4 yards per carry running the ball, 4 quarterback sacks and 2 interceptions off of Cody Fajardo, and their O-line allowed 0 sacks. You are going to win almost 100% of the time if you generate 4 quarterback sacks and you give up 0. Let's go to Hamilton's side now, and like I mentioned, the Ticats have put together back-to-back wins here on the back of a 24-point third quarter. However, they did lose quarterback Matt Schiltz to a long-term injury. He's on the 6-game IL, and so, you know, we're talking about Taylor Powell season here now in Hamilton. I got to believe this was exactly the type of game that the Ticats were banking on when they signed James Butler. When they brought James Butler over, this is the type of game they were waiting for. He touched the ball 17 times, 167 all-purpose yards, so almost 10 yards per touch, which is exactly what they want. He scored his third rushing touchdown of the season, and in his last 2 games, he's carried the ball 31 times for $189 on the ground. He's also added 5 catches for 58 yards. That's 247 all-purpose yards in his last 2 games. Those are James Butler games. That's exactly what they were looking for. It's an element to their offense that they've been missing over the last few years. James Butler's that guy. And after what was their secondary's best game of the season 2 weeks ago, they coughed up 378 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns to the combo of Taylor Cornelius and Jarrett Daig. So the secondary had a big regression in that game. They allowed 515 total yards to the Edmonton Elks in that game, and a better opponent probably wins that game as a shootout. Now, obviously, Hamilton held on to win that game, but again, better offenses and better opponents probably going to win that game. And now with Taylor Powell, a quarterback, a lot of question marks for Hamilton. I don't like saying this name, but I'm going to say it. Swag Kelly is in full effect. Full effect in Toronto. And I just don't see enough consistency on the defensive side in Hamilton to consider an upset here in this spot. It's worth mentioning the Argos are not only are they unbeaten, but they're also 4-0 against the spread. So they're winning games and they're beating Vegas's number. The Argos are arguably the best team in the CFL right now. Let's go ahead and grab the Toronto Argos on the road in Hamilton. Toronto gets the win over the Ticats. Now on the line, Hamilton is taking +7 here as a home underdog. But like I mentioned, Argos are 4-0 against the spread. They're more than capable of covering this number. I see a regression in the Hamilton defense again. I see a regression in the offense, obviously, without either one of their top 2 quarterbacks in this game. Still no update on Bo Levi Mitchell, so who knows when that's going to be like. This is Taylor Powell's ship moving forward, unless things go terribly astray, in which case, do you pick up the phone and call the Edmonton Elks? Let's go ahead and lay those -7 points on the Toronto Argos. Total in this game set at 49.5, and I believe these 2 teams have hit like 7 of 10 overs or something like that. Like it's fairly heavy to the over for these 2 teams. I think one team gets to 30 points. It's tough to stay under 50 when that happens. So I think we're going to go ahead and take the over in this one. Not by a ton, mind you, but I just think the over hits. So let's take over 49.5 points in Toronto. Hamilton, let's go Argos 34, Ticats 17. Argos double them up. They cover the -7 and give me the over on the points. Halfway mark of the show here, and I will take the opportunity, as I always do, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at NerdTees. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to nerdtees.ca, you can enter my promo code, which is BWFinest. You're going to find a bunch of incredible loose leaf tea as well as estate and flavored coffee blends on nerdtees.ca. And my promo code BWFinest is going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get your free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, which is an excellent value. Or if you're one of my American friends, you're going to get a great conversion rate on the almighty US dollar. Today's blend is a tasty and smooth vanilla hazelnut tea. Really, really excellent taste and a really, really, really fantastic smell. Like the second hot water hits this, you just get that vanilla come back to you, and it smells incredible. It tastes incredible, just like almost everything that I have found on nerdtees.ca. Use that promo code BWFinest, save you 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. Picking up the pace here a little bit because obviously this episode's going to be a day later than it normally is, and I want to make sure that I get this out ASAP. So we are going to go now to Saskatchewan and BC, this game taking place at BC Place, and the Riders dropped a hard-fought game last week at home against Calgary just by a couple of points. They did allow Jake Maier to shred them for 315 passing yards through the air, and Maier has not had a good season this year, but 315, that is his top mark this season. Mason Fine is now the QB1 moving forward for this Riders team. Trevor Harris had to have surgery on the knee injury. And look, the Riders O-line, while not exclusively at fault for what happened, because again, it was a freak injury, but they allowed 7 quarterback sacks in that game, now allowing the second most in the CFL, only to Montreal. And we talked about Cody Fajardo and how beat up he must be. But when you look at the play that Trevor Harris got hurt on, it was against a 3-man rush. It was 3-on-5, and the pocket still collapsed. And Harris still felt like he had to try to scramble for the first down. And then disaster struck. That shouldn't happen against a 3-man rush. It just shouldn't. And I say that as if I'm a coach. The coach knows that. The offensive linemen know that. Everybody knows that. On a 3-man rush, you shouldn't have the pocket collapse like that. And put a thought in a 37-year-old quarterback's head, boy, I better scramble for this first down. And I don't think I'm being too rough on Riders fans or Riders players or whatever, or Trevor Harris or anybody. I don't think I'm being too critical here. That's not a play that should have... Go watch that playback. It's difficult, but go watch it. That should never have happened. Quite frankly, outside of the run game, which the Riders' run game was good in that game, 19 carries for $112 as a team, there were not many other ways where the Riders were the better team in that game. Like, look, they got 2 punt return touchdowns from Mario Alford. That's why this game was as close as it was. Calgary could have sort of cakewalked through this thing had those big chunk plays not happened. And Mason Fine damn near orchestrated the comeback there. He was 6 of 8 for $122 and 2 passing touchdowns. But outside of the run game, the Riders were by and large the second best team on the field in almost every other aspect. They're going to go to BC to face a Lions team well-rested coming off of their bye, and they showed out against the Alouettes offensively and defensively. They limited Cody Fajardo and the Owls to just 1 touchdown and a bunch of field goals. Shout out David Cote, one of the best kickers in the game. And they turned just 16 first downs on offense into 35 points. Hyper efficient on the offensive side. Shout out to Lions rookie running back Sean Shivers getting the start with Taquan Mizell injured. Now, Mizell is practicing in full, so it will be real interesting to see what the running back room kind of looks like. But Sean Shivers had an electric performance in that game. 16 touches for $136 all-purpose and a rushing touchdown. So now with Mizell practicing again, it would be kind of interesting. Like, look at what the Argos do with A.J. Ouellette and Andrew Harris. Could you potentially see the BC Lions do something similar with like a 2-headed running back monster, or kind of like what the Riders have done at times with Jamal Morrow and Frankie Hickson? Like, you kind of see that sort of 1-2 punch, like thunder and lightning, or like what the Green Bay Packers do in the NFL with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Sort of that, like, we're really seeing that shift in the NFL towards tandem backfields, 1A, 1B backfields. Could you, hypothetically, see something like that with the BC Lions? They've got 2 young, talented running backs who've both shown their measure at the CFL level. Stranger things have happened. One thing is certainly for sure in this crazy CFL season. There is nothing the BC Lions defense can't do. Nothing. Period. Nothing this defense is not really good at. They're the number 1 total defense in the CFL. They're a top 3 run defense. They're the best secondary in the CFL. They're number 2 in sacks, so the pass rush is on point. They allow the lowest QBR against them so far this season, and they're the only defense allowing less than 20 points a game. They're also the second most efficient in terms of yards per point allowed. It is a long day for opposing quarterbacks and just opposing offensive coordinators trying to play against this Lions defense. They've been for real for a couple of years now, and they're really showing it this year. So obviously, I think it takes something quite special to topple this Lions team defensively. Not something that's just fine. But look, all respect in the world to Mason Fine. He's in a very difficult position, the same as Dustin Crum was last week. We saw what Dustin Crum did in the second half of that game. I just don't see the same thing happening against the BC Lions defense. This is a tough draw for their first post-Trevor Harris game for the Riders. And look, Trevor Harris might be back towards the end of the season, but that's a nasty injury. So don't count on it. Like, kind of like Nathan Rourke last year. Like, he could be back. Don't necessarily count on it. Heavily behind the BC Lions in this one. Let's take the Lions fresh off the bye and at home to get the win over Saskatchewan. Now, right now on the line, the Lions are laying 10 points, minus 10 here as home favorites. And this felt like at least a one-possession game to me, and that was before taking into account the quarterback injury and being well rested off the bye, and just with the bulk feeling is like BC by at least 7. Then when you take all the other things into consideration that they have coming into this week, I don't see an avenue for me to not lay minus 10 in this one. It's both games this week that have double-digit spreads. I'm going to lay the points on both of them because I think BC by at least 11 points, that feels pretty good to me. So we're going to go ahead and lay minus 10 here on BC, and I don't have to hold my nose when I do it. Total in the game set at 45.5 points. I actually think this stays under because I don't know what the Riders' offense is going to produce against this elite, exceptionally dangerous Lions defense. I got to stick under in this one, under 45.5 points in Saskatchewan, BC. Let's go Lions 30, Riders 10. So Lions win, Lions cover, and give me the under. And the last game we're going to look at sees the Ottawa REDBLACKS traveling to Calgary to take on the Stampeders, a battle of two teams who came up with somewhat I shouldn't say Calgary's wasn't an unlikely win. Ottawa's definitely was, but two teams that really had to dig deep to come up with victories last week. And Ottawa doing what they did last week against who they did it to and under the conditions that they did it ranks amongst one of the most shocking comebacks that I have ever seen, and getting to watch it happen in real time was crazy. Down 19 points entering the fourth quarter to the modern day dynasty in the CFL. Just insane. Like, it was, I think I might have even put this on Twitter. This was the Dolphins beating the Patriots on that last second Kenyon Drake lateral. You know, the one where they had Gronk in the back, playing defense, and Gronk misses the angle. Dolphins win. It was that. So crazy that it will be heretofore identified as the Dustin Crum game. Sees him go for 261 yards passing, 103 yards rushing as a quarterback, 2 rushing touchdowns, including the game winner in overtime. That is birth of a legend type stuff. And Dustin Crum really showed what he may never have a better game than that for his entire career. Who knows? But in that one game, a legend was born. His last name's Crum. But I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. As much as Dustin Crum deserves so much of the credit for what happened in that game, the REDBLACKS run defense deserves all the credit in the world here as well, stuffing Brady Oliveira for a minuscule 16 yards rushing on 9 carries. Less than 2 yards per carry for Brady Oliveira, who has been on fire this season. And they really forced the Bombers to play an anti-clock game, aka forced them to play a little scared, didn't they? On Calgary's sideline, the Stampeders get the job done, riding a 17-point second quarter and weathering the Mason Fine-led comeback late in that game. And look, 3 Rene Paredes kicks in the fourth quarter, including a 50-yard game-winning field goal with zeros on the clock. Rene Paredes has been doing it at a high level for a while in this league. That guy is legit. He's incredible. So, Jake Maier. Jake Maier is a bit of a conundrum here. This was easily his best game of the season. 70% on his completions, 315 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. He's still thrown a pick in every single game. And I believe his touchdown to interception ratio, I think, is 4-7. So he's not having a good year. This was his best game, and he can certainly build momentum off of this game. But Jake Maier to throw 1+ interceptions so far this year has been the most solid bet in the CFL. Also, hey, there's the Luther Hakunavanu breakout game that I've been waiting for and I've been calling for. Luther Hakunavanu in his last 2 games, just 8 catches, but a $152 through the air and a receiving touchdown that he got last week. I talked about it before. Him and Trey Odoms-Dukes, they have to step up their games to fill the void missing from Malik Henry being done for the season. Everybody's talking about Markin Michel. I'm not quite on that train yet, but Luther Hakunavanu and Trey Odoms-Dukes, and Hakunavanu had his best game of the season last week, a lot to build momentum off of, and that guy is a nasty red zone target. The Stampeders pass rush essentially doubling their sack total in one game. Thank you, Riders offensive line. They go from 8 sacks on the season to 15. But look, they only had 8 leading up to that. So this pass rush, that feels like a blip on the radar. Can they build momentum off of it? Absolutely. But do I expect them to suddenly become this dangerous pass rush? Not really. In general, I need to see more outings like what we saw last week to kind of make up for the malaise that I feel about this defense. They're one of the least efficient defenses in the CFL in terms of yards allowed per point. And look, they only allowed 349 yards last week. That's a fairly good game. It's better than their season average. But the Riders turned those 349 yards into 31 points. So that's horribly inefficient. Really, really bad. Even though you really can't underestimate the potential for the adrenaline dump from Ottawa. Like, they put everything emotionally, heart and soul into that game. What a comeback, what a win. You can have that, right? Like, athletes will talk about it. They'll talk about the adrenaline dump. Ottawa's also winless away from home, but Calgary's also, winless at home. So I just don't trust the Stampeders team. I got to be perfectly honest. I don't trust them. I don't trust the lack of efficiency on the defensive side. And when you're looking at that as a metric, yards per point allowed, the number 1 most efficient defense in the CFL, only allowing a point every 17.4 yards they allow, is the Ottawa REDBLACKS. But I like the upset here. I like the Ottawa REDBLACKS on the road in Calgary to beat the Stampeders at McMahon Stadium. I think that defense comes to play. I think it's the defense that winds up winning this football game. I like the REDBLACKS. Give me the upset. Ottawa goes into Calgary and beats the Stampeders. Now on the line, Calgary's laying -5 here as the home favorite. Obviously, I like Ottawa to win, so give me the +5 on the points there for the REDBLACKS. Total in this game is set at 44, and like I say, I think defense wins this game. I don't see a ton of scoring coming out of this game, so let's take the under here. I don't think this might get into the low 40s. In fact, I think I probably will take this into the low 40s, but something tells me that this is a defense wins game. So let's give me the under on this. Under 44 in Ottawa. Calgary, let's go REDBLACKS 21, Stamps 18. So actually we'll stop just short of it getting into the 40s. Give me the under on the 44, the +5 on Ottawa, which I think you take one way or the other, and give me the REDBLACKS to win this game outright. There you go, folks. Those are your picks for Week 7 in the CFL. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home beating the Edmonton Elks 35-16. So give me the -14.5 on Winnipeg in a game that goes over 45.5 points. I got the Toronto Argos in Hamilton doubling up the Ticats 34-17. Give me -7 on the Toronto Argos and give me over 49.5 points. I got the BC Lions coming off the bye at home, beating the Saskatchewan Roughriders 30-10. So give me the -10 on BC and under 45.5 points. And give me the Ottawa REDBLACKS to upset the Calgary Stampeders in Calgary by a score of 21-18. So give me +5 on the REDBLACKS and under 44 points. I just realized something. Since it's Wednesday, I can actually give you my CFL fantasy lineup. It is right in front of your eyes right now. And look, the most confident thing that I can say about fantasy this week is there is no good argument not to start Dustin Crum. There is no good reason against the third least efficient scoring defense in the CFL to not start the cheapest quarterback. So look, Dustin Crum, he's my starter, saving some money so I can invest that money in the running back position and wide receiver and flex. So you look at running backs. Look, AJ Ouellette, I said he's going to be stapled to my fantasy roster all season long, and I wasn't lying. I'm going to roll Brady Oliveira as well because the Elks' run defense is atrocious, and I think Brady puts up huge numbers. Wide receivers, I'm actually looking for a little bit of value here. I really wanted to go Dominique Rhymes in this spot, but I decided to save a little bit of money and go Keon Hatcher. It saved me a couple $1,000s, which allowed me to grab Justin Hardy. If I'm going to have Dustin Crum, I might as well stack him with his number one receiver, that being Justin Hardy, although Nate Bahar did have 10 catches in that game, in the Dustin Crum game last week. But we're going to go with Justin Hardy, and then I'm going to grab David Ungerer. Look, 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games, including 2 last week. He is a favored red zone target for Swag Kelly, so we're touchdown hunting with that one for sure. But we're going to grab David Ungerer on a really, really valuable dollar amount. And on the defensive side, the BC Lions, man, they're the best defense in this league, and we are going to grab them in a matchup where they should be able to feast against Mason Fine and the Riders. It feels so good to give you my actual fantasy lineup. That's really cool. All right, the Week 7 episode is now in the books. Apologies for it being a day late. I don't expect that trend to continue into the coming weeks. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. Gonna edit this bad boy and get it up for you as quickly as possible. Thank you so much again for the continuing support. Even though the picks have struggled, you folks have not. You have been here really consistently, and I appreciate it exceptionally much. Thank you so much. Enjoy the games in Lucky Week number 7. We'll see you again for Week 8.